Thanks for joining me for video. I'll call this 1.5 as I didn't know how long YouTube would let you post a video for, and I just wanted to kind of give you what my goals are for this car and what I'm building it for. So this car is being built specifically for road course racing. I didn't want to overbuild the car to where it would make it not enjoyable to road race. So I know a lot of people are going to look at my part selections and say, I should have done this, I should have done that. I could have gone with a bigger turbo. I could have did, different whatever. And, that's fine. I value that input. There's a lot of people out there more knowledgeable than me, especially with MR2s. There's a lot of longtime owners that have more experience. And I tried to get as much of that information as I could before I made my choice as far as parts and what my end goal was and things like that. So with that being said, I was looking for a consistent and reliable 450 to 550 at the wheels. I ended up going with a PTE 5858 on an ATS build, 2.3 motor, a Rev 3 build, with a lot of other stuff going on with it. Now, the reason I chose the engine and the turbo I did is with road course racing, I wanted to stay with a small enough turbo that I wasn't worried about spool, that I wasn't worried about, I have to be in this gear at this RPM to get through, turns and stay in my power groove and, different things like that. So I felt like that was a turbo that was big enough that I could take advantage of straightaways, but not so big that I really had to hammer it on the straightaways to try and keep up with people. I'm hoping with the gears in the 153 trans that it lends itself well to that turbo, and if I find that it's really not meeting what I want to swap turbos isn't really a huge deal. I can go smaller or bigger depending on what I want to do with the car. This car might see a pass or two down the drag track, but probably not, because suspension wise they're going to be set up very different from road course to drag track. And the car has a lot of aero parts that are on the car already that I really don't want to have to unbolt and everything to take it down the drag track. So with that being said, I really don't think that the use of the car is going to change. I know, one of my big, I would say beacons or, examples that I kind of built this car off of was Eric Hux's car with, he did as simple as possible and he tries to do as much different stuff as he can, but he's getting to the point where swapping setups around and changing the car up to try and make it perform optimally at each event is getting to the point where it's harder for him, because to be a jack of all trades, you're never going to perform as well as, singling down to, one focus. And right now he's kind of setting the car back up for drag racing and going back to the track, trying to chase a time, and that'll even carry over into the half mile stuff that he's looking to do next year. So for him, that kind of made up my mind that if I was going to build a road race car, I want to build a road race car. I don't want to try and build a quick street car that I might occasionally take to the track. This is something that will probably in the next 2-3 years end up being trailered back and forth, not registered for the street, simply for the fact of once I put a roll cage in there, I will not drive it on the street. I have kids. I don't need to die because someone T-boned me and I bounced my noggin off a roll cage bar. That's just how I feel about it. So with that being said, a lot of the parts that I'm putting in the car were selected off the idea of keeping the build very simplified and making it so that the car would be as reliable as possible without overly stressing any individual part. And I did a lot of research on what parts I was putting into the car and what I felt the end result was going to be. And I've seen a lot of people ruin builds by, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I need a new exhaust manifold. Well, I want to put a bigger turbo. Okay, so I'm going to do a top mount turbo. Well, now I'm going to do a giant turbo, and they turn a 400 or 500 horsepower goal into an 800 or 900 horsepower build. I mean, maybe not on an M2. They are ones out there, but what ends up happening is they overbuild the car so much that it doesn't perform for the function that they were building it. And if you just wanted a horsepower queen, there's cars for that. And I've seen a lot of people get way over their head financially with cars when that happens. Project creep is a big problem, and I've had it in the past, and I try to minimize it as much as possible. And you'll see that in some of the ways that I do things on the car. Now, with the project creep that I did have on this car, it was all towards focusing on the end goal of making the car as simplified and as reliable as possible. I didn't want to do a lot of aftermarket parts that I really didn't feel like were going to give me any net benefit other than looks on the car as far as the performance parts. And after talking to numerous different vendors and just different people that have built a lot of these and used a lot of different parts, I feel like I kind of narrowed that down a lot on this build. Um, could I have gone with big name aftermarket parts that had high price tags to get more performance? Maybe. I don't know. There's so few back to back to back dyno comparisons of how different parts actually work on cars nowadays. And even if you do see them, 90% of the time you can't trust them, because I can go on a dyno and put in whatever correction factor I want and have a car spit out 9,000 different answers about what it makes power wise. So how do you trust it unless you do it on your own car? And with with that being the case, with so many different exhaust manifolds or intake manifolds, how do you know what the actual gain is going to be? And that's why I switched from one brand of manifold, intake manifold, to another, because I trusted the results of ATS on their intake manifold versus Racer X, because I don't know if they've actually done it or they just had a car that they put one on and they dynoed it, and it was like, oh, he made more power. It was definitely the manifold. It could have been a hot day versus a cold day. It wasn't a back to back comparison. So I mean, how do you judge performance increase from one part to another? So with that, I tried to narrow down and limit what I was spending my money on to what was important for what I was getting out of my dollars invested. And I focused that onto a couple different areas that I'm going to cover in other videos, and I'll go into why I did what I did in those videos for those individual parts. But I just wanted to put out there in this video that I'm calling 1.5 what my goal for the car was. Um, I did a lot of cost benefit analysis of doing a case swap. So before anybody says I should have case swapped it, when I did the math and worked out the price for getting like a CSS filled block, or where they close the open deck and things like that, it worked out to um, about $4,000 more than I spent to do the built case, Rev 3. And the reason I say that is because by the time you do the block from CSS and you get, the I'm not sure, I'm not a Honda guy, I think it's the RCF head, which is pre-ported from the factory, and then you do cams, and then you need do an exhaust manifold, you're going to do a turbo, you're going to you have to buy a stock ECU, you got to buy the wiring harness, you have to buy the cannibal kit. So I did all my research, and for what I was looking for to get the horsepower I wanted, I felt like I'd be way overbuilt and way over price tagged for the performance I was looking for. I know why a lot of the drag guys do K24 builds, and if that's what I was building the car for, honestly, that's the way I would have gone versus the 3S GTE. I stuck with this just because I knew I wasn't going to have any fitment issues. It was already what was in the car, so I didn't have to buy any additional wiring harnesses or get conversion parts or anything like that. So I could spend that money on other parts that I felt would get me more of a benefit. And talking with Hux, I went through all of that, and I've seen his growing pains with the NA, because that was a consideration at one point, was doing a high compression NA for road coursing because of heat management, and his struggle to gain horsepower versus shedding weight is kind of what steered me more towards this, because I feel like once you get down to the weight that he's at, it becomes super critical how you shave weight and maintain the safety and the weight of the vehicle where it needs to be. So with this, I could do bolt-on turbo kit, ECU, and a bigger turbo and make 400 horsepower and overcome the weight issue very simply. So that's why I picked this. That's what my goals with this build are. So if you have any questions about why I did what I'm going to do, why I picked the part combination that I did, or anything like that, let me know. I'll try and answer any questions that get asked in the comments, or what I'm hoping to do is in future videos at the end kind of answer any questions at the end of the next video that people had in the previous video, just in case it's a question that gets answered while I'm building in the next step. So if you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. Let me know. Until next time.